The wind howled like a mourning widow as Elizabeth Carter pressed her frozen palms to the steering wheel of her rusted station wagon, staring out into a curtain of white. Snowflakes, thick as cotton balls, pelted her windshield, burying the world outside in a suffocating silence. She was stranded, out of gas, out of money, and nearly out of hope, on a desolate Wyoming backroad. Elizabeth, a soft-spoken schoolteacher from Chicago, had driven across 3 states in search of a new beginning. Her last job had been slashed. By budget cuts, and with her mother's medical bills piling up, she had accepted a position at a remote school in Teton County. The pay was meager, the location isolating, but it was all she had. Her savings had gone into fixing the transmission and buying warm coats for her students. She didn't have enough left to replace the bald tires that now lay buried under a foot of snow. She opened the car door, and the blizzard's icy breath wrapped around her. It was nearly dusk, and the realization sank in like a stone in her gut. If she stayed, she'd freeze. If she walked, she might get lost. The snow swallowed landmarks whole. There was nothing, until she saw it. A flicker of orange light, faint, and bobbing like a firefly. She squinted. A lantern? Elizabeth stumbled out, shielding her eyes from the whipping wind. A silhouette emerged, broad shoulders under a heavy coat, cowboy hat dusted with snow, boots crunching steadily toward her. He looked like he'd walked out of a different century. "You all right, ma'am?" he called, voice rough but calm. My car. I'm stuck. I don't have—" She stammered, but he'd already seen enough. "Come on," he said. "You'll freeze out here." She hesitated, but her shaking limbs gave her no choice. He took her bag and led her down a narrow trail, through a copse of pine trees until a cabin appeared. Sturdy, modest, smoke puffing gently from the chimney. Inside, the warmth made her cry. Actual tears, silent and sudden, trickled down her cheeks as the fire's glow thawed her numb skin and soul. The cowboy, whose name was Cole, didn't ask too many questions. He made her tea, gave her thick wool socks and a bowl of venison stew, then sat quietly across the hearth, letting her catch her breath. "You live here alone?" she finally asked, fingers curled around the warm mug. "Most folks would call it lonesome," he replied. "I call it peaceful." It wasn't until 2 days later, when the storm had passed and the world outside turned from blizzard to winter wonderland, that Elizabeth learned who Cole really was. She woke early and wandered into the living room, only to find Cole carefully wrapping a faded photograph and tucking it into a small box alongside medals and a child's drawing of a horse. Her eyes caught the words scribbled in crayon. "To Daddy. Come home soon." He looked up, caught off guard. "Didn't mean for you to see that," he said softly. Elizabeth didn't press, but he told her anyway. "I had a daughter, Molly, sweetest kid you'd ever meet. She and her mama lived in Colorado. I was always out here, working cattle, thinking there'd be time later." He paused. "But there wasn't. Car accident 3 winters ago. The cabin suddenly felt heavier. I couldn't bring myself to leave this place, too many memories. But when I saw you in that storm," he exhaled, "it felt like the first time I had a reason to light the fire for someone again." Elizabeth sat beside him. No words, just silence shared between 2 people who'd carried too much alone for too long. By the 4th day, the roads were clear. A tow truck arrived for her car, and Elizabeth prepared to leave. She thanked Cole, fumbling over her gratitude, the kind that could never be repaid in dollars or words. But before she could step off the porch, Cole said, "There's a small school down the hill. Kids from the valley come up for class twice a week. They've been without a real teacher for months." She turned, surprised. "You sure they'd take someone like me?" He nodded. "They'd be lucky to have you. And I wouldn't mind some company when the snow comes back." That winter, Elizabeth never left. She took the teaching job, lived in a spare room at the cabin until she could afford her own place. But by spring, she never moved out. They built a life rooted in second chances and stitched together by acts of quiet courage. A meal shared, a fire lit, a heart opened. In time, Cole helped fix her car, and she taught him how to write again. Letters, this time to veterans and children across the country. He carved a new sign for the school, Hope Hollow Elementary. She planted a garden beside it, and every Christmas, when the snow began to fall, they would walk the same trail through the woods, lantern in hand, not because they were lost, but because they had found their way back to the light. The seasons turned gently that year, as if even nature itself was holding its breath, watching something rare unfold between two hearts long accustomed to solitude. Spring in the valley came like a slow song, soft rains tapping the tin roof of the cabin, buds sprouting defiantly through thawed earth, and children's laughter echoing once more from the schoolhouse windows. Elizabeth found herself walking to class each morning with a smile she didn't realize had returned to her face, holding thermoses of hot cocoa that Cole insisted on packing for her. The townsfolk, at first curious, began waving to her with familiarity, and more than one mother came to thank her with tears in her eyes for awakening something in their children that had gone quiet for too long. Cole, for his part, didn't change. Overnight, he was still quiet, still woke up before the sun and spent hours tending to things that didn't ask questions: fences, livestock, the woodpile. But now he left notes by the coffee pot in the morning. Simple things. Don't forget your scarf, storm might roll in. Or kids left you drawings on the porch again. The one of the horse looks more like a dog, but it's got heart. And slowly, the silence between them softened into something warm and familiar. They cooked together without needing to talk, read books by the fire, sometimes aloud, sometimes not. She taught him to play old piano tunes on the out-of-tune upright she'd begged the school to rescue from storage. He taught her how to ride, how to track rabbit prints in the snow, how to fix a fence without cursing too much. It wasn't romantic at first, not in the way movies paint it. It was real. Two people rebuilding trust with time and effort, stitching pieces of their broken lives into something whole again. And yet, one evening as summer waned and golden light bathed the valley in honey-colored hues, Cole surprised her with a picnic near the lake. She laughed when she saw the blanket was crooked and the sandwiches unevenly cut, but when he reached into the basket and pulled out a small hand-carved box, she stopped breathing for a second. "I don't have much," he began, voice rougher than usual. "But if this is where you see your forever, then I'd like to spend the rest of mine making sure you never feel lost in a storm again." Inside the box was no diamond ring. Instead, it held the same crayon drawing of the horse, Molly's. But now, beneath it, Cole had etched new words into a piece of barnwood. "To Elizabeth, thanks for bringing the light back." She didn't need to say yes. He saw it in her eyes. And she saw it in his, hope finally unburied from the weight of sorrow. The wedding was modest, held under the wide Wyoming sky, with children from the school tossing wildflowers, and neighbors gathered in mismatched chairs. Cole wore his best boots, and Elizabeth her grandmother's scarf. There were no chandeliers or orchestras, just wind in the pines and the steady thrum of hearts that had waited patiently for peace. Years passed. Elizabeth became more than a teacher. She was the valley's storyteller, its memory keeper. She wrote books inspired by the school, the kids, and the place that had saved her. Cole expanded the cabin, built a greenhouse for her tomatoes, and never stopped writing letters. Some to Molly, some to no one at all. Just thoughts, recorded in a careful hand, kept in a drawer she was free to read whenever she wanted. One winter, a letter arrived from the Department of Education in Washington. They wanted to honor Elizabeth with a national award for excellence in rural teaching. The whole valley celebrated with banners and potluck dishes, but she just smiled shyly and said, "I didn't do anything special. I just stayed." Cole squeezed her hand under the table and said, "Sometimes staying is the most courageous thing of all." And maybe that's what their story became. Not one of grand adventures or sweeping drama, but of quiet bravery. Of what happens when kindness is offered without expectation, when a warm cabin and an open heart are given freely in a storm. Years from now, when the students she once taught bring their children to the same little schoolhouse, they'll point to the carving above the door, Hope Hollow, and tell them about the teacher who got stuck in a blizzard and stayed. about the cowboy who shared